Hello everybody, my name is Necroxis, long time no see, but if you've been a long time viewer of my channel, you might know back when I had a little bit more passion about the World of Warcraft story before the fire of my fandom and my passion was stomped down by the boots of Warlords of Draenor, of Legion, and of Battle for Azeroth into basically a cinder. Every once in a while, I would make a short video on a short story or something weird and out of the ordinary that Blizzard released that I really liked. Even during Warlords of Draenor, I made a short story about the still fantastic short story Apocrypha about the Sethic in Spires of Iraq, which is still great. You should still go back and read it if you haven't. But today, that dwindling ember of fandom left got a little... It was ignited a little bit more today because Blizzard released what turned out to be an actually pretty fantastic short story by Robert Brooks, who always delivers, called We Ride Forth. It is about the 4 Horsemen of the Ebon Blade: Mograine, Sally Whitemane, Thoras Trollbane, and General Nazgrim. Basically, right before we see them show up in Icecrown and save Bolvar after Sylvanas is attacked, destroyed the helm, blew out the world top, yeah, it happens like right before that. And just to give you guys some I guess clarity on who Robert Brooks is, if you don't know, he's written for Diablo, Overwatch, StarCraft, Warcraft. I looked it up real quick because I don't remember all the things. He's the fucking... Of course he is! He's the author of the Anduin comic, Son of the Wolf, which is fantastic, and I made a reaction to on my channel where I cried like a baby at the end. He also did the short story for High Mountain. He wrote the audio drama Tomb of Sargeras before... or A Thousand Year War, right before Legion came out. Some of the other things he wrote is Afterlife's Ardenweald, my favorite one, of course. I didn't even know that. And he wrote this, We Ride Forth. So, I suggest you go read it. We're going to go into a little bit of a spoiler because I'm going to give my review. So, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, spoilers! So, I love... I'm going to praise the short story by also talking about why it's better because the game isn't doing this. Ever since Legion came around, and we had the new 4 Horsemen, Alexandros Mograine, General Nazgrim, Sally Whitemane, Thoras Trollbane, I was like, the idea in my head, I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. I don't like that Nazgrim came back because I really loved Nazgrim as a secondary character. I feel like for how small of a role he actually had, he had kind of a big impact on the story, and me personally, I really loved his idea of I'm loyal to a fault, and even though I know at the very end when I'm about to die that I'm following the wrong person, my code of honor prevents me from going against him because I swore my fealty to him, and so then he dies. I loved that arc of his character. When he's introduced, I think in Cataclysm, it's his first role. He plays the Horde NPC in Vashir, I believe, opposed to Admiral Taylor, who is the Alliance NPC, which they end up fighting in Miss Pandaria, blah, blah, blah. It's all very fulfilling. I love his arc. But he was the only one I felt like shouldn't have been brought back. But when they brought them back, I was like, oh my god, cool. They brought back at least 2 really interesting characters. Nazgrim is fantastic. I'm upset that he's coming back, but if he is, cool, because I loved him. Whitemane is a super intriguing character because I've always loved the Scarlet Crusade, even when I was playing vanilla and I really wasn't into the story still. People might remember I've told this story before, but I finally started getting really invested in the Warcraft story. I played Warcraft 3 and Frozen Throne, and I knew what was going on when I went into vanilla, but the thing that really captured my interest, and I was like, alright, I'm gonna start following the story, was the Great Masquerade quest chain, which is the Onyxia quest chain for the Alliance, which is when you find out that Katrana Prestor is Onyxia. After that, I was like, oh shit, I'm going in on the story. This is going to be a great franchise, and it was for a long time. So yeah, I even back then, before I was like, I'm going hard in on the story, like, I love the idea of the Scarlet Crusade. This was before Blizzard did all their stupid what I believe is stupid shit with, like, the light could be evil, but it could be good, or we don't know. It's going to be the villain coming up with the void. Like, I hate that idea in general, but and because it diminished what was cool about the Scarlet Crusade, which is what they used the light, which at the time was just this solely good force, but they were so stringent in their beliefs that they could twist this inherently 100% good force into doing things that were evil. It's also why one of the original four horsemen, Sir Zeliek, the Death Knight who used light abilities, it was also why he was really interesting, because again, before Blizzard ran out of ideas and just decided let's make the light bad, they had this Death Knight who was so holy and devoted to the light that he could use the light even as a Death Knight. I was like, that's so cool. So, I've always loved the Scarlet Crusade, and Whitemane's always super interesting. She's a very charismatic figure for how little she actually is in the story. So when they brought her back, I was like, oh shit, this is gonna be great. Thoras Trollbane, I was like, okay, whatever. It could be interesting based on, like, political ramifications. But in my mind, I was like, oh, they're bringing him back in Legion, which means they're not going to address that at all. And it turns out I was right. It's kind of even worse than that. They brought these three interesting characters back, and they acted nothing like what they used to be. Nazgrim did not act like what Nazgrim was like. Whitemane did not act like Whitemane was like. And Thoras Trollbane was just like, I'm here. And it was, like, I'll give specific examples. Nazgrim was all about, like, honor and serving your leader and, like, honorable combat. He would not, like, resort to, like, trickery or cruelty. He was just, like, an honorable soldier. And, like, one of the first things you see Nazgrim doing after he comes back as a Death Knight is, like, torturing all these people by, like, he's, like, death gripping, like, a bunch at once and, like, laughing about it. And I'm like, this is fucking not what Nazgrim would be like. Whitemane, for her example, and they address Whitemane's, what I'm about to say, in this short story, which I'll talk about, which is great. But she was always like, I'm fucking crazy and I love the light, but I'm doing it because the Scourge is bad, and in my own warped, crazy, psychopathic mind, I'm doing it to protect Azeroth from the Scourge. So when she comes back to life as a Death Knight, I was like, oh shit, there's gonna be a lot of cool shit, because she's gonna be like, oh fuck, I'm dead, but I'm still able to serve the Azeroth and serve the light, and it's like this weird dichotomy where this zealot who hates the undead became undead, and then you bring her back in the Legion Death Knight quest chain, and she's just kind of there. She's like, alright, sure, I'll join, and then that's it. She has no other characterization. Now it's like, what the fuck, this sucks. So cut to the short story, We Ride Forth, and they kind of address all of this. They even address things that I didn't think that they would address. Like, for example, Nazgrim and Thoras Trollbane have this really interesting back and forth really quickly, where they talk about how originally as Death Knights they weren't friends, but then they became friends because Thoras Trollbane was one of the leaders of the Alliance of Lordaeron who just wanted to kill all of the orcs rather than put them in internment camps, and Nazgrim was one of the orcs in the internment camps. So, and it was like, oh, Thoras eventually realized that killing all the orcs off would have been bad, and that's how they bonded. And I was like, that's so cool! It's something that only someone who really knows the lore of this franchise would remember to put in, which kind of feels like what a lot of the writers currently in WoW do not have. Like, they don't have that. I don't know if they're all new, or I don't know if they don't care, or I don't know what's going on, but it feels like a lot of the... my favorite thing about storytelling is referencing old shit that would be referenced in this scenario. Like, Final Fantasy XIV does that a lot. It does it really well. It's why I love it a lot. Characters that you've met before and that are no longer present in the story would come back for moments that they should. And it's stuff like this where I'm like, oh, obviously Nazgrim was a slave and Thoras wanted to just kill them all than rather be a slave. Obviously they would have conflicting feelings about that. That's so cool that he referenced that. And even further, that Thoras was like, oh, I was wrong. We shouldn't have killed them all. The internment camp was better, even though it was still bad. And I was like, that's awesome. And then you go Whitemane, where they explain how she gets from I'm a crazy zealot to I'm dead and it's okay because I'm still defending Azeroth. There is a line of logic through there, which is what they explore in this short story, which is Whitemane as a crazy zealot of the Scarlet Crusade. Sure, they were crazy evil zealots, but their twisted goal ultimately was to just defend Azeroth from the Scourge. And her becoming a Death Knight still lets her defend Azeroth from the Scourge. And I could see the line of logic there. It's just the game never did that or even tried. But the short story here does. Like, each Death Knight has like a little few paragraphs where you see like their inner thoughts, their inner monologue. It's like interspersed between as the narrative's going along. And I was like, this is so interesting. Like, I love that they bring all of these characters back to how... The best thing about this is these characters feel like how they should feel. Nazgrim feels like how he should feel. Whitemane feels like how she should feel. Thoras, who I didn't give two shits about, I'm like, oh, okay, he's pretty cool, actually. I like his back and forth with Nazgrim. Mograine's always been pretty interesting, so I'm not really even talking about him, but he's good as well. I love how they've written him, or Brooks has written him as, like, you know, obviously he is the leader of the Four Horsemen, but I love how he's taken such a... he feels like a leader. It's not just like you're told he's the leader. He feels like the leader. Like, he's the one that goes and confronts Bolvar and is like, Bolvar, what the fuck y'all doing? You're bringing all the Scourge to Icecrown. You're sending all the Death Knights away. You're doing this shit that Arthas was about to do before he attacked everybody. We swore that we would serve you, but only if you weren't like Arthas. What are you doing? Like, that's very much what a leader would do, and I like that. And then to talk about the overall narrative where... I guess apparently a lot of people were upset that during the Shadowlands intro cinematic where Bolvar and Sylvanas fight, I was annoyed that he lost so quickly. I wasn't annoyed that he lost, but that was all my annoyance was. Apparently other people I didn't even know were annoyed that, like, the Death Knights weren't there. The Four Horsemen or the Ebon Blade weren't there at all. I always took it as, like, sure, the Death Knights and the Four Horsemen are, like, working together, but the Lich King and the Ebon Blade are working together, but they weren't, like, his servants. And they were off doing their own thing because shit was still going down. Like, obviously, and we find out that Bolvar told them to do this, like, obviously they would be watching what Sylvanas is doing because she's acting like Lich King 2.0 before she even comes to Icecrown and breaks the helm. And it's like Bolvar told them, like, oh, go watch Sylvanas. She's up to some fucking shenanigans. But don't kill her or don't engage because... Bolvar's smart enough to realize that even though Sylvanas is doing evil things, if the Ebon Blade suddenly swoop in and kill a leader of the Horde, that's, like, fucking shit's going crazy after that. So it's smart on Bolvar to be like, watch her, but don't intervene until I tell you so. Like, that made sense to me, and I guess this short story kind of explains why the Death Knights weren't there to protect him, and I was already like, I don't have a problem with that, but... For those who did, I feel like this is a good defense as to why. Also, it makes sense because Bolvar was always under the assumption that Sylvanas was coming to take the helm and put it on herself, not destroy it. He never even thought she would destroy it. He thought she was just going to come and take it, which is why he was sending all the Death Knights as far away as he could, because his hope was, if Sylvanas stole the helm, the other newly created Death Knights and the Four Horsemen were so far away that she would not be able to influence and take them over. And I'm like, oh, obviously that makes perfect sense. It even makes sense when Bolvar, Mograine shows up and is like, I'm going to kill you because you're not explaining what's going on. And then Bolvar, like, directly takes control of him and is like, you can't kill me on your own. You better come back with the other Four Horsemen before you even stand a chance. And Mograine takes that as like, oh shit, Bolvar's become evil. But Bolvar is thinking they're going to come back right at the exact time when whoever wins, me or Sylvanas, they're going to kill us. Because if I win as Bolvar, I'm going to have to use the Helm of Domination to unleash my full power, which is going to just corrupt me, and I'll just become evil like Arthas. And at that point, they might as well just kill me. Or Sylvanas is going to win, but she'll be so hurt that the Ebon Blade can then show up and kill her and stop her from doing what she's doing. And I'm like, Bolvar, you're a fucking genius. This makes perfect sense either way. I guess it is kind of new information, this argument that if you use the Helm of Domination at all, you basically just become evil and corrupted. I'm sure Blizzard's going to be like, that's because of the Jailer, even though we've never brought this up before now. But, like, I'm down with that idea. Like, if you fully embrace the Helm of Domination's power, you basically just taint your soul and you become evil. That makes sense. So I like how Bolvar's like, well, if I win, I'm going to have to use the helm and I'll become evil and they should kill me. If Sylvanas wins, she's going to take the helm and she needs to be killed. Otherwise, she's going to use the Scourge to destroy all the Azeroth. Like, all of the motivations of all the characters, including Bolvar and Mograine and Whitemane and Nazgrim and Thoras, like, it all made sense. There was never anything I read where I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, everything was great. All these characters have a bunch of little interesting interactions, like Nazgrim. Nazgrim still likes to tease Thoras and Mograine, Thoras and Mograine, like, he pretends to, like, curtsy as, like, a human gesture, and they're just like, oh, we're so fucking sick of Nazgrim doing this stupid shit, and Whitemane's being, like, all sassy, and she's like, I was waiting for my chance to kill the Lich King, and then when Whitemane and Nazgrim go and save Bolvar, Bolvar's, like, dejected, and he's given up, and then Whitemane's like, bitch, I came all this way to kill the Lich King, and you ain't the Lich King anymore? I was like, oh, that's Whitemane. That seems such like the thing she would say and do. But her doing that kind of, like, inspires Bolvar to be like, alright, it's not over. We gotta go to the Shadowlands. We gotta fight Sylvanas and kill her. I was like, this is great. Everything about this was cool. Like, I love the inner monologue between all the four horsemen, where they were like, well, if the Lich King takes us over, we're gonna have to kill one another, so therefore none of the four horsemen should be alone by themselves. I was like, that makes sense. Like, everything made sense, and it was great, and somehow it felt like a lot of story was told, even though there wasn't, in only 4 pages. And I was, like, on the edge of my seat after every page. I was like, alright, I gotta see what happens next. Because they just talked about Nazgrim. They're clearly going to talk about each 4 horsemen. What are they going to say about Whitemane? I can't wait to read it. Like, I just sat there and just blasted through it as fast as I could. And it was fantastic. So I strongly urge everyone to give it a read. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. I thought this was probably one of the best short stories. I've read all of them, and there have been so many that I can't, like, rank them all. And especially if you include, like, the digital comics and, like, the audio dramas, like, all this secondary lore stuff. Like, I wouldn't be able to do a list, but it would be pretty high up there with, like, Son of the Wolf and, like, Gul'dan's Gul'dan's Harbingers, or Warbringer, the Warlords of Draenor one for Gul'dan, where they explain his origins. That was also really good. Like, I would put those up there along with, like, Azhara's Warbringers. Like, this was very, very good. So I strongly encourage you to read it. It's not like you're going to be missing out on anything if you don't and you play Shadowlands. Obviously, Blizzard always does this, where it's like, you don't really have to read any of the auxiliary stuff. But it redeems a lot of shit that annoyed me from Legion with the Death Knight class haul. Because I think the Death Knight class haul campaign in Legion is fantastic, but they really dropped the ball on the characterizations of the 4 horsemen, and a big part of that storyline is bringing back the 4 horsemen. I even like that I mentioned this at the very beginning, I like that they referenced the fact that Mograine and the Death Knights attacked Light's Hope Chapel, and Mograine got fucking smote by the Light, because he's having a conversation with Whitemane in this short story where Whitemane's like, what does it feel like when the Lich King takes control of you? Like, what should we do? And Mograine's like, well, the only reason I broke free before was because I was on holy ground and I was angry. And then Whitemane's like, oh, so all we have to do is pretend to rely on the light and, like, being angry? I don't know if that's gonna work. And then Mograine's like, you better hope you be smote by the light, because it's much better than being a slave, and trust me, it sucks to be smote by the light. I know, and I was like, oh shit, they remember that in Legion, they did that. Like, and I wonder, they won't, this is never going to happen, but the fact that they brought this up in this book gave me, like, a little inkling of hope, like, maybe they'll address the fact that, hey, yeah, the Ebon Blade attacked Light's Hope Chapel, and also, the Ebon Blade, like, decimated the Ruby Sanctum in Northrend, and killed a whole bunch of red dragons just to get them out. I wonder if that's ever going to be a thing again. Like, it would be cool to have that be a plot point. But they reference that shit in this, and I was like, oh my god, what a good writer, because a good writer would remember that shit like this happened, and Whitemane was like a fanatic worshiper of the light. Mograine got destroyed by the light in Legion. Of course they would talk about that. Duh! It was just great. So I really encourage everyone to read this. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you couldn't tell by my frantic fanboying without any notes and I'm just jumping back and forth, I really love this. It, like, rekindled my love of what I like about Warcraft lore for just the briefest of moments. So that was great. But yeah, We Ride Forth by Robert Brooks. Only 4 pages, so it's not long at all. Go read it because it's fantastic. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon, because we got, 6 days till Shadowlands? Alright guys, Stay awesome. Wear your masks. And yeah, I'll see you.